We'll begin episode 2 in just a minute, but first of all, let's go back to part 1. Lionel and the Thundercats are about to lead the new Thundera, but before that could happen, Panthro did the honors of blowing up the Black Pyramid. Then Lionel told the rest of the good guys to patrol through Earth. In the meantime, Tiger and Mumm-ra and of course the Thunderclaw stayed on Third Earth. Meanwhile, during their trip to New Dondera, thanks to Snarf and his nephew, they banded their friends the Snarfs to build a new lair at the Valley of the Stone Giants. In the meantime, however, Mumm-ra and his canine pal are now on a new mission to cause trouble for New Dondera. So after Mumm-ra had failed to persuade Jagar but succeeded on stealing the Regulator, things are looking bad on New Dondera. So part 2 begins where part 1 leaves off. Egbert and his friends, you remember them back in part 1, they began building the new lair for the Thundercats. And of course, let's not forget 9 of the Thundercats who had arrived since back in part 1. They're there too. So we have Lionel, Chitara, Panthro, Bengali, Linkso, and of course Wily Kid and Wily Cat, Snarf and his nephew. Snarf and his nephew, don't forget they're in charge of the construction since back in part 1. Now, Snarf was about to tell the Thundercats the good news that a new meeting room will be putting up soon, and that's when the earthquake started. Now, remember, Jagara had the gyroscope under control since back in part 1, but she's getting worried that the repairs are not going to last long. Sure, despite the minor gravitational problem, everybody, the Snarfs and the Thundercats, had landed back down on the ground again. So for now, that's good news. Snarf is now all upset, and he pleaded a case to ask a question: how is everyone going to continue constructing a lair if there are earthquakes going on, if there are problems that are continuing? Meanwhile, in the Great Beneath, you remember Jagara back in part 1. Now she's getting really concerned, and she has every reason to, since the Regulator is missing since back in part 1, and she's doing all she can. But she's getting concerned that if the gyroscope continues to act up the way it did, then Thundera's in serious trouble and it'll fly apart. That's because remember back in part 1, she was unaware that you know who has taken it, and we know who that you know who is none other than Mumm-ra himself. So meanwhile, the Black Pyramid, in the Tomb Chamber, we have not only Mumm-ra, but also his canine sidekick. And he just pleaded the case with Jagara while watching in the cauldron to say that she's absolutely correct. Because since he took the Regulator since back in part 1, and of course without it, New Thundera will be in trouble, and of course Thundera will explode and the Thundercats will be eliminated. Meanwhile, back at the Valley of the Stone Giants and of course the construction of the new Cast Lair, however, Stark just asked Panthro a question: why couldn't they just build a lair somewhere else? According to Panthro, he said, well, the problem with that, even if that were true, none of the areas of New Thunder are safe. That's exactly why they picked the valley to begin with. Lionel also said to Snarf that this is the best place that they could find, so what he's telling Snarf to have himself, his nephew, and their friends just do the best they can. Lionel was trying to cheer up Snarf the best way he knew how. In the meantime, Lionel suggested to have himself and his Thundercat friends to find out where the source of the quakes is coming from. Suddenly, the Thundercats and Snarf just heard Snurfer, who's Snarf's nephew, telling everyone what happened. So Snarf, who's Snurfer's uncle, just asked him what was going on. So Snurfer said, I know this sounds crazy, but I just heard signals that's coming from the churning rocks, he said. Then Snarfer said, wait, there's more. What's even weirder is there's a transmission that's coming from there. So Lionel suggested to have Snarfer lead the way so they can listen in. So that's what they did. So Snarfer got to work on the communicator right away to reach anybody that could receive a transmission. And of course, Egbert is helping him. Next thing you know, not only did Snarfer receive a transmission, and that's when the voice said that the Thunderian refugees are coming to New Thundera soon. Not only that, but the voice also said that they're landing somewhere near the churning rocks. So for the Thundercats, this is good news. But Snarf panicked and After learning this news, that's when he told Lionel that they had to do something to rescue the refugees. Then the voice says, "Wait, there's more. The refugees are being captured by Two-Time." Anyway, the voice continues to say that Two-Time is now in Dome Down, and that's where the refugees are being held. So the voice says, "Please hurry, help us." And that's when the communicator exploded. Oh, by the way, the refugees will show up later. Now, luckily for Snurfer and Egbert, they'll be all right. And that's when Panthro had pleaded a case to Egbert to say, "I think you've juiced up the communicator a bit too much." So back with Lionel after learning about it, that's when he told Snarf to go get Chitara right away so they can go find the refugees. And so Snarf heads off. Then Lionel told Panthro that his job is to remain at the construction site. So that way he can find out where those tremors are coming from and why. And of course, Lionel has a hunch that if he's not mistaken, that those earthquakes themselves are not exactly natural. After Panthro agrees, and then he has his turn to plead his case to say, if anybody has caused the earthquakes themselves, then I'll find out about it, he suggested. So in the feliner were Chitara, Lionel, and Snarf. Once the feliner's all set, the feliner takes off. And that's when Lionel told Chitara to take the quickest route to the churning rocks, and Chitara agrees. Later, in the Pyramid's tomb chamber were Mumm-ra and his canine pal. Now, Mumm-ra had just found out that the Thundercats were on a mission to save the refugees. But that doesn't mean he has a plan to stop them. And how, you may ask? You remember Grune the Destroyer, who was defeated twice? So he decided to enlist him to do a favor for him. So what Mumm-ra did first is that he asked for his agent Spirits of Evil for one simple request, is to bring back Grune the Destroyer. So meanwhile on Third Earth, remember Grune's tomb from season 1, episode 11 that the Balkans had accidentally went into? What Mumm-ra did is that after Mumm-ra had resurrected Grune from his internal sleep at the tomb, that's when Grune appeared in front of Mumm-ra in his tomb chamber on New Thundera. So long story short, after Grune had appeared in front of Mumm-ra in his Pyramid's tomb chamber, that's when he suspected that it was he, Mumm-ra, who freed him from the tomb. So Mumm-ra not only said that that is indeed correct and is indeed him, he even said that he has a task, a favor, if you will. At first, Grun just told Mumm-ra that there was nothing that he can give him, but what he can do, he'll do it. So back with Mumm-ra's favor for Grun, he said that the Thundercats are on their way to the churning rocks, and so it's his job to destroy them. And why is that? Because as Mumm-ra says in his case, it was the Thundercats who imprisoned him since 3 seasons ago in episode 11. And of course, as anyone will tell you, it's all part of the plan. Later, back with the field liner with Chitara, Lionel, and Snarf, they had finally arrived at the Churning Rocks. But by the time they arrived, Lionel said that there's a problem and there's no place for the field liner to land anywhere. Then suddenly, Lionel just saw something at the corner of his eye, so he's asking Chitara to get the field liner to go around again, and so she did. And that's when Lionel spotted a place to land for the field liner. Back with Lionel after he lets Chitara know that there's a landing pad or a platform up ahead, that's when Snarf, however, pleaded his case to say, I just hope that whoever built it is friendly. So as the feliner went ahead and landed on the platform and without a problem, that's when the three of them came out to investigate. So being curious, Chitara wanted to know who built the platform and why. So Snarf suggested after he agrees with Chitara that maybe one of his star friends will know, and so will his nephew, and that's when they saw something or someone that appeared out of nowhere. And that's when, by surprise, they have now encountered Grune the Destroyer himself. Now remember, just moments ago, he was sent on his mission. Back with Lionel and Chitara, they know what to do. They decided to have a 2-on-1 battle against Grune. That can happen, that's when Snarf ran off, so Grune went first to plead his case with both Lionel and Chintara to put their weapons down and surrender to him. But instead of surrendering, that's when Lionel went first to attack with his sword power. But unfortunately, Lionel's sword power isn't doing a thing against Grune, and now Lionel's getting worried, and so is Chitara. So when Chitara goes up next, she's now one-on-one with Grune. Well, Snarf was hiding at that moment. He couldn't believe what he saw. Back with Grune, he continues to plead a case with both Lionel and Chitara to say, you gotta do better than that. So long story short, while the battle between the Thundercats, Lionel and Chitara against Grune went on and on and on, and none of their attacks are doing anything, Snarf, who's still there, he's getting worried and concerned. So back with Snarf, when it's his turn to go up for an attack after telling Grune to pick on someone his size, but Snarf doesn't have a chance either, and that's when Lionel thought he had disappeared somewhere, or so he thought. I forgot to mention that's after Chitara and Lionel had finished the second round of the fight. Then, before you know it, Lionel was told by Chitara to look behind him, and when Lionel did, he turned around and blocked Grune's attack just in the nick of time. But bad news, the sword broke again, and that was the third time it happened, by the way. If that's not bad enough, Grune just used his power on the mace to freeze them both. So what's left for Grune to do is to permanently destroy the Thundercats. And by how? He thought, why not pick them a place where their destruction is more suitable? He started looking bad for Lionel and Chitara, and then long story short, when Lionel woke up and after Grune disappeared, he tries to wake up Chitara, but no such luck. But then when he looked at the corner of his eye, he saw Snarf. Well, Snarf's fine, that's the good news. So back with Snarf after he finished climbing up, he told Lionel, don't worry, I'll save you. But Lionel tells him no way, and he told him why. Because, well, the bonds that both Chitara and Lionel have had, thanks to Grune, are unbreakable. But Lionel says that he has a suggestion for Snarf. He said, take the pieces of the Sword of Omens and then take them to the new lair. Find Bengali. He can fix it, he said. Speaking of Bengali, he's at the moment at the construction site of the new lair located at the Valley of the Stone Giants. So meanwhile there, besides Bengali that was at the construction site, also there were Linkso and Panthro, and they're trying to figure out the patterns of these tremors. But according to Panthro, there's a problem. There seems to be no connection to them whatsoever. There's a bigger problem because according to Linkso, whatever these tremors are, they're not natural in any way. Bengali, however, after he confirms with Linkso's suspicions, he couldn't help but wonder who was causing these disturbances to begin with, when meanwhile in the great beneath, things do not look well for the gyroscope, as it continues to go out of control. Jagar is trying the best she knew how, but each time she tries to repair the gyroscope, things just get worse and worse. So after a long story short, things at the Valley of the Stone Giants and the construction site didn't look much better, thanks to that earthquake back in the Great Beneath. Luckily for Jagara, she manages to get the gyroscope under control temporarily anyway, until the regulator is returned. Anyway, back to the Valley of the Stone Giants and of course the construction of the new lair after that minor earthquake, the Thundercats rushed to the scene. So Wily Cat was asking if everyone's okay. So Pedro went first to answer Wily Cat's question to say the good news they're fine. So Bengali went next to ask the question if everyone's hurt. To answer that question, that's when Wily Kid told Bengali that other than herself and her brother are having scrapes and bruises and minor injuries, but they're otherwise fine. At least they know what to do. Even though Panthro had agreed with the Thunder Kittens, but then pleaded his case to say, let's just hope they're just tremors. In Panthro's case, he also told the Thunderkins that any more disastrous quakes like that could mean a whole kettle of fish, to coin a phrase. That's when Linkso suggested that there must be a source somewhere that might be a cause. Later, back at the Churning Rocks, things didn't look so good for both Lionel and Chitara. Now, Chitara finally woke up. That's good news for her. But then she asked Lionel a question how long it's going to be before that rock hits them both. Well, Lionel told Chitara that he isn't sure of it. So Chitara went next to plead her case. She said that even if Snarf finds Bengali, there's not a lot of time. Well, in Chitara's case, this can mean a serious problem for both her and Lino. So speaking of Snarf, back with him. Now remember, he was on his way to Bengali at the Valley of the Stone Giants where the construction of the new lair took place. But Snarf pleaded his case to say it's exactly hopeless because there's no way he's going to pass that churning rocks, or so he thought. That was until he saw something weird up in the sky. Oh, by the way, in this episode, we're about to meet Char the Blacksmith, but we'll get to him later. So back with Snarf. Even though he had no idea what was up in the sky or what was going on, but he's about to find out when something just grabbed him and took him up to where the cloud was. That's the exact same cloud that he saw, he being Snarf. But then, Snarf had no idea what he was about to witness. That cloud wasn't a cloud at all. He was taken inside of the spaceship. The spaceship, by the way, is called the Flying Furnace. What's interesting about the flying furnace is carrying the electromagnet. That explains the magnetic personality that Snarf has witnessed. And of course that explains why the sword along with Snarf is carrying them inside of the ship itself. So now that Snarf's inside the flying furnace, he's never seen a ship like it before, and it's the first time he witnessed it. Before you know it, Snarf was face to face with Char the Blacksmith. Told you we get back to him later. And Char the Blacksmith, has never met Snarf up until now. And Snarf has never met Char before just up until now. So when Char was asking, what kind of strange creature are you? And that made Snarf upset. And he told Char the Blacksmith, I'll show you what strange is, and etc. So back with Char the Blacksmith, he took the broken sword of omens and looked at it and said, this is interesting. So Snarf says, well, you're not kidding. Of course it's interesting, he said. Then Snarf pleaded the case to say, it just so happens that what you're looking at is the sword of omens and it belongs to Lino. But Char dismissed that claim and said that it belongs to him now because he's not only the blacksmith, but he's also a collector of metals and etc. So then it's Snarf's turn to plead his case to Char by asking him a question. I guess this sword of omens is no use to you now, isn't it? Snarf explained to Char the situation. He said that he was on his way to the new lair where Bengali can fix it and etc. And that's because for one simple reason that it's broken. Snarf said to Char, if you don't mind, if you would give me those pieces back, I'll be on my way, but Char refused. Snarf, however, pleaded his case with Char to say that those broken pieces must be forged with the sword itself and etc. And then he also said that only a blacksmith of the Thundercat could do it, and that would be Bengali, and it will take a lot of Thundercat magic to do it in, and etc. But Char the blacksmith, he heard what Snarf said and then asked a question. Did you say Thundercat magic? Are you saying that I cannot fix this broken sword? But the Char had pleaded the case to say he's the greatest metal worker and he's not kidding. And Snarf says, well, true, but that doesn't excuse the fact that the blade of the sword itself belongs to the Thundercats, he said. Snarf said to Char that Bengali will fix it, and that's when Char made a suggestion with Snarf to say, well, what did we see about that? So what Snarf did is that he went ahead and followed Char. So Char didn't hesitate to go right to work to repair the Sword of Omens right away. So that's exactly what he did. Now Snarf has a reason to be concerned, so he told Char, I hope you know what you're doing. The Thundercats will never forgive me for this if I lost the Sword of Omens itself, he said. So after a long story short, Snarf got upset with Char for turning the sword into a donut. Meanwhile, back with Lino and Chitara at the Churning Rocks, they're still being bonded at the moment. That's when Chitara told Lino, I wish I could tell you that I have a very good feeling. You can't give up hope just yet, Lino said. Snarf will come through. You'll see. Later, back at the flying furnace with both Char and Snarf. Well, speaking of Char the blacksmith, well, the good news for him is that he had finished reforging the Sword of Omens. Plus, what's even more good news is that it looked better. But then suddenly, what Snarf and Char saw was unbelievable. A blast of light that blinded them for a while. So, because of Char reforging the sword's magic came back. So long story short, back at the Turning Rocks with Lionel and Chitara still bonded at the moment, that's when, before you know it, Chitara's insignia begins to glow. So when Lionel looked at her to ask what was going on, but before he could get an answer, his insignia was glowing too. He had no idea what was going on, so when he asked Chitara, she said she isn't sure. So what they didn't know is that what happened was is that the Sword of Omens itself has been reforged thanks to Char the blacksmith. Speaking of Char, back with him in the flying furnace and along with Snarf, now you can tell that Char was very impressed with the work he did. And so he told Snarf he wanted to keep the sword for himself as his collection, but Snarf refused, and again he pleaded his case to say that the sword belongs to the Thundercats. So after a long story short, both Char and Snarf were having a tug of war with the sword. Back with Chitara and Lionel at the Churning Rocks, that's when Chitara made her suspicions to Lionel clear. She said that whatever's going on, the Sword of Omens itself has been repaired, and she felt it. So she suggested to Lionel to call the sword to him. So following Chitara's suggestion, that's exactly what Lionel did. So back in the flying furnace with both Char and Snarf, that's when suddenly the light from the sword just blinds them both. That's not fascinating enough, and then long story short, what Snarf and the sword did, it left the flying furnace, and of course Char was in shock because he just couldn't believe what he'd seen. So Snarf and the sword had arrived at the Churning Rocks, and then good news for the reforged sword, it went right to Lionel's hand. So it did. At the Black Pyramid, in the tomb chamber, we have Grune talking to Mumm-ra. And Grune just told Mumm-ra that his debt has been paid since Mumm-ra has set him free. But then the cauldron just told Mumm-ra and Grune what was going on, so they went to investigate. Grune and Mumm-ra saw what was going on in the cauldron, although we didn't see it, but it is confirmed that thanks to Lionel's reversed sword, thanks to Char the blacksmith, he broke free from the shackles from his hands and now he is working on his feet. He'll get to Chitara in just a minute. After Mumm-ra saw what had happened, he looked at Grune and he told him that he had failed in his mission. Told Grune that he has no choice but to punish him, but Grune just pleads his case to interrupt him by telling Mumm-ra that he hasn't failed yet and his mission's not finished. So he told Mumm-ra that he must finish what he had began. So he left the pyramid. Back at the Churning Rocks, since Lionel's now free, it's now Lionel's turn to set Chitara free. So he did with his sword's power, now that it's been reforged. Oh, good news, Chitara is now set free, but now here comes the bad news. When Lionel looked over his shoulder, he saw Grune appear for the second time on the same platform as the feliner was. Long story short, after that combat with Grune, and it went on, and then finally at last, Grune was disarmed thanks to Lionel. So shortly after that, Lionel does what any good guy would do now that the sword's been reforged. He projected a Thundercat signal from his sword, so he did. So what the Thundercat signal did was unbelievable. It took Grune back to Earth in his tomb, right where he belongs. Meanwhile, back at the Lair's construction site at the Valley of the Stone Giants, though it is confirmed that Lionel and Chitara got back okay, what Lionel did is that he thanked Char for what he did to the sword. Now remember, that's the same blacksmith that Snarf had met earlier. Well, not only that, but even better, the Thundercats are forever in Char's debt, because thanks to him, the sword is more powerful than ever. Well, Char not only appreciated the compliment from Lionel, but he said he has a confession to make. He said the moment he laid eyes on that sword, he wanted to keep it from himself, but Snarf wouldn't allow it. It was thanks to him that Snarf convinced him otherwise. Then Snarf told Char, well, it's like I told you before. Only the Lord of the Thundercats can handle it, and since you reforged it, it's now back together where it should be, he said. So, not only did the Thundercats have the next friend, Char the Blacksmith, but New Thundera is still in trouble because of all the earthquakes. Back at the Pyramid's Tomb Chamber, watching it happen in a cauldron was Mumm-ra and his canine pal. Now, Mumm-ra had just pleaded his case with Lionel to say that he can have the sword. Remember the regulator that he took from the gyroscope from the Great Beneficence back in part 1? That's because neither of the Thundercats knew, and of course their new friend Char, that Mumm-ra still has it in his possession. He didn't please his case, and to make it clear that without the regulator, that means that there's a problem in New Thundera and they'll be doomed. But will it? And what about the refugees? Will the Thundercats rescue them? So that ends episode 2 in part 2.